Hello, Amanda from In-House Ally here. I just want to tell a little bit of a story from a client experience I had recently. Just going back and making it clear to people that QuickBooks isn't always the solution. And there are certainly times when, even as a QuickBooks expert, I have people come to me and I don't point them towards QuickBooks, which seems a little absurd and it seems a little bit against everything I do and where my expertise lies. But this is, this is what you get when you work with someone who is paying attention to all of the variables around your situation and making sure that we're finding the right next step for you. So, a good example of this was I had somebody reach out who they knew someone who had just recently worked with me and they had a good experience setting up their QuickBooks. So this gal reached out saying, well, my friend had this good experience getting her QuickBooks set up with you and getting some initial training. And I think that's what I need for my business now too. So we got talking, and more as we were talking, it sounded like she's a service-based business. The expenses that were going on in the business were fairly manageable. Which is typically the case with a solopreneur service-based business. Oftentimes the expenses are fairly manageable. I believe she was keeping track of them using Excel. One business bank account, maybe a savings business account. And then, one of the questions that I ask is, well, how does the money flow into your business? And then she starts getting into where it seems like the real headache is, right? There's all these different platforms that she's using. There's not a great process for invoicing, collecting payments. It's not very seamless. There's often time and headache involved with that. And there was also the kicker that she had some other very specific limitations on how she needed to receive money, and how that process worked. And ultimately, one of the big reasons I tend to recommend QuickBooks Online is because you can, from within QuickBooks, create, send an invoice, and have your client pay it. And the way that those financial entries happen in your QuickBooks, if you're sending the invoice from QuickBooks and getting received payment through QuickBooks Payments, the bookkeeping is just like, it's such a dream. And it makes the room for error so much less than if you're trying to account for sales recorded on another platform. But in this specific case, she wasn't a good candidate for QuickBooks Payments. And when you take that away, what are some of the other big reasons you have QuickBooks Online? Well, there's been able to pull financial reports and see how profitable you're being, but there's also obviously having your information from a compliance standpoint is necessary too. And I really like QuickBooks when it comes to some of the project tracking, some of the tags. There's QuickBooks Payroll that can be built in there, which is sometimes the right option for people. But the more we look through it, I'm going, none of these real reasons that I recommend QuickBooks, I don't feel like any of them are the right fit for you. And where I'm really hearing headache is the invoicing side and the receiving payment side. And there's some specifications there we need to look at. Ultimately, what we ended up doing was kind of in place of a full-blown strategy session with me. I took some of that time instead and did a little extra research for her and compiled a report of, what are some of these other alternative forms to invoice and receive payment. And I really do think, right, the recommendation of moving on to have actually more of a full-blown CRM system, something like a Dubsado or a Honeybook, would actually be a great fit for her. Also understanding though, and being really straightforward with my client that just like QuickBooks, there is a learning curve. There is an onboarding process. You want to be able to set those things up right to really make the most of it. And especially with something like Dubsado, I recommend to people you hire someone to help you set that up. I personally even tried to work with Dubsado a few years ago, and I didn't get the most out of it because I didn't get it fully set up. And ultimately, I dropped it. So that being a consideration, right? What we ended up really niching down into was the right just next step improvement for her was leaning into her Stripe payment processor. And we found a few extra specifics about how that software works in a way that it has certain features that really, really mattered to her, and really opened up some possibilities for her to be able to function and run her business in a way that she needed to. But again, that's a reasonable next step that she can take to continue to move her business forward. She's going to continue keeping the expenses on a spreadsheet. Hopefully someday, either hiring out the bookkeeping or getting trained and set up on QuickBooks Online to do it herself. I think that's absolutely a good move in the future. Obviously, I like QuickBooks Online, but really being in tune with my client, her budget, her circumstances, her situation, the timing of her business, the size of her business, her comfort level with technology, where that real spot of friction was with her business. Ultimately, QuickBooks wasn't the answer. QuickBooks is not always the solution. So if you're really on the fence about like, well, I think I just need QuickBooks, but you'd like to just have an actual conversation with someone about that before you try to dive all the way in, hit me up. hello@in-houseally.com, or you can find my website with all my information, inhouseally.com, or go ahead and shoot me a message. Talk to you later. Bye.